Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Now as you all know, or probably know, hopefully know, we just got a new update and it's a pretty big one, if that, perhaps, or maybe bigger, if not just as big, around about the same size gameplay wise as the orgs and communities update. And I say that because I do like the new orgs and stuff, well, new-ish at the time of making this video anyway. For veterans like me at the very least. And this gives us some new flagship abilities and the new flagship mechanics, which I'm going to mostly go through. But of course, as luck would have it, I am in the Pioneer system just before the update released, so I'm super sad and can't test play anything. But everything that I can do, I am going to do for you guys. In short, most command systems, actually every command system has a flagship ability, and when you create your fleet you can manually designate a flagship and distribute buffs to your fleet. And some ships have unique abilities, which we are going to go through. I believe that's pretty much the very basic overview. Actually we'll save that for just a second. And yeah, let's dive into it. So what I've done is I've just gone through all the blueprints in the game, pretty much. I'm pretty sure I've got all of them, and I've just grabbed all of the abilities that I can find, all of the flagship abilities that are on all the different blueprints. A lot of them have, well, not a lot, but there's a fair few that have unique ones, and a fair few, even all of them, that have some pretty common ones. So I've grabbed them all, and here I've got a summary for you all, if you're looking at that, and it just gives a very brief overview, and I'm going to go into these in more detail. So I've mentioned a few times now that every ship in the game has one, and that's because of this focus fire skill here. So you can see I've set it out a bit differently depending on how things go, but unique ones, it's just the ship, and then I've got the ability next to it and then screenshot underneath, whereas more common ones I've got the skill and then list out the ships, and then have the screenshot of the ability underneath. But focus fire, every ship in the game has this ability, so any ship can be your flagship for your fleet. And this is just when selecting targets, boost attack efficiency by prioritizing attacks on certain percentage of selected targets based on the number of valid targets in the engagement. So it doesn't give us a whole lot here, except that you're only going to target a certain number of things. So you're going to be focus fire a bit better than probably before this update if you're using a flagship. But that's just my speculation and what it sounds like to me. And so now we're going to go into all the strategic strike stuff, which has been pretty big talk, at least in the communities and stuff that I am in. So we're going to go through that. There's 3 levels of strategic strike, and pretty much the main difference is the area that they can cover. So the Guardian and Tundra A, as well as the Cirrus A, so there's 2 support ships that are at base, so the Guardian support and Tundra support, and the Cirrus aircraft have this strategic strike ability. So when you launch a strategic strike, it's a designated 90-degree area. It is interesting to note that this is the support and the support variants of the Tundra and Guardian, not the actual aircraft carrying variants. So if your fleet is using like the Guardians that carry corvettes or the Tundras that carry fighters, you're going to have to include some of these ones in order to use strategic strike if you're not using bigger ships. Strategic strike 2 is a 120-degree area, so a little bit bigger, not tremendously big, but a little bit bigger. And this is the Predator A and B, the Jaeger A, Cass C, and Solar Whale and Marshall Crux both have this for free. And it's pretty much the exact same thing. You launch a strategic strike within a 20-degree area instead of a 90-degree area. So for this, in this case, you do have the Predator and Jaeger that carry aircraft, and the Cass that carries aircraft, one of the Predator variants, and then both of these mentioned carriers, you don't need to spend tech points to get this upgrade. Strategic Strike 3 is only available to the carriers, and this is what gets you a full circle, full 360 degrees with a maximum distance of 15 gigameters, I believe that is GM. Then we have multi-target attack for the Solar Whale. So the Solar Whale can upgrade this to level 3, and then there's Martial Crux and Jaeger, which can upgrade this twice, and this increases your max strategic strike targets. Because I haven't been able to use Strategic Strike, I'm not familiar with how it works as such. So whether this just means that you can hit more guys before you have to stop, or whether you can hit multiple targets at the same time, I'm not sure. But generally speaking, I think you would want your aircraft to focus fire, but we'll just have to see how that works. Range extension is available on the Solar Whale and Martial Crux. This increases your strategic strike radius by +5. If this is +5 or +5 tiles or gigameters or whatever, I don't know, it doesn't tell us. We'll have to test play that. If you have any information regarding things that I don't know, if I get anything wrong, miss anything like that, please let me know in the comments, and I will endeavour to correct myself. Wave adjustment is available on the Martial Crux and CV3000. It prioritizes launching aircraft squadrons that have extended attack duration in a strategic strike. So I think this is your strategic strike lasts longer, or you send ships that can strategic strike for longer first. Need to test that because it does say prioritize launching aircraft squadrons, but it sounds like it wants to mean that you just increase the attack duration, but again, we'll have to see how that works. Thank God for being stuck in the Pioneer system, yay. Martial Crux has auxiliary attack radar. This increases your hit rate for strategic strike by 2%. A nice small boost. And then Solar Whale has aircraft emergency repairs, where you repair 2% on aircraft returning from strategic strike. That's pretty nice, I suppose. We'll just have to see how those abilities, how much they cost command points wise. Wing Hussar, this is sort of an interesting one. This is the aerial denial variant, which has 2 that you can get access to. It has the Anti-Aircraft Network 1. So the Anti-Aircraft Network is an ability that there's a few ships that have it, but it changes from ship to ship. So they've all got the same name, but the actual ability changes slightly as well. So be careful of that. But this one increases when your fleet's aircraft is at strength disadvantage. Your anti-aircraft weapons will attack aircraft first, so you will prioritize attacks on aircraft and increase hit rate by 1%. It's a small increase hit rate, but just the priority to attack aircraft alone is pretty nice, and you kind of do need every percentage you can get when firing at aircraft, particularly with ship-mounted anti-aircraft weapons. And then we have firing calibration. Anti-aircraft weapons of Antonius ships have a 5% chance to deal 80% additional damage to the target hit. So this is interesting. And there's another ability that functions based off faction as well. 5% chance is quite small, but 80% extra damage is quite big, particularly on anti-aircraft weapons. So whether this is worth the tech points in most situations is debatable, and the fact that this particular ship is front row, a lot of people don't like that because you lose it. Well, it doesn't survive very long, and therefore its anti-aircraft abilities don't really get very much value. But I have seen it being used, and hopefully this adds additional strength to anti-aircraft. This does synergize with Carillion, Guardian, Predator, CTG, and most of all Mistral, among other ships that I haven't listed here, but these are ships that can have or do have good anti-aircraft capability compared to other ships previously. Carillion anti-aircraft weapons seem to function Guardian seems to function okay. Predator has some anti-aircraft variants and stuff, but I haven't ever used Predator. CTG, possibly anti-aircraft modules and stuff like that. But Mistral, this can combo really nicely with Mistral because they put out a ton of shots. So yeah, if you got a ton of shots, that's a ton of chances, and it could be a bit of a damage boost, but it's certainly not a massive one. It's a little bit of a premium. Mare Tranquillitatis, this is the Interceptor one, the one that usually everyone calls garbage, and the Pulse one is good. The Interceptor one has a new buff, which has anti-aircraft network exactly the same as the Winged Hussar. You prioritize attacks on aircraft and increase hit rate by 1%. And then fast switching. The cooldown of all Jupiter Industries anti-aircraft weapons is reduced by 3%, and that can be upgraded twice, so theoretically 6%. That works on all your Mares, your Ceres, Callisto, Eternal Storms, and Spore, most of all. So similar to the Winged Hussar, it's a small boost, not heaps meaningful, and comes at a little bit of a premium, but it can potentially be quite useful. I mean, if you pair these with Mare Tranquillitatis Pulse variant, they can be fairly effective for their points. These also seem like they might be fairly effective. And overall, it seems like anti-aircraft issues might be getting fixed, purely because there's now so many abilities that are going to be increasing how much range they cover, or their targeting priority, which tends to be their biggest issue, because a lot of anti-aircraft weapons, particularly on ships, just don't fire at aircraft like we'd like them to. Then we have the Predator. Anti-aircraft network on the Predator is the same as the previous two, except that it increases hit rate by 5% per level, theoretically. So we hit aircraft first and increased hit rate by 5%. Sorry for the stutter. Light Cone anti-aircraft network is different entirely. Taking advantage of anti-aircraft UAVs, positioning support systems to coordinate projectile anti-aircraft weaponry of ships in the mid-row, extending the anti-aircraft range to the same row. So I believe that this is your anti-aircraft UAVs on this ship, because interestingly, this particular flagship upgrade isn't in the command system. It's in the actual Tundra UAV system of the Light Cone default variant, the multi-role. So I believe that this is to increase your coverage to the entire row, which hopefully will work. But previously it hasn't even worked when this is the only ship being targeted by aircraft, so we'll just have to see. Patrolling defense, the Ares C, so that is the armored variant, and Eternal Storm. Very slightly, but all in all the same. We have for the Ares, if you only use capital ships, so that's not supercaps. Supercaps are battle cruisers, auxiliary ships, and carriers. If you're only using capitals, then you can also guard other resource nodes with an operation area. So you can guard one additional source per level. Whereas with the Eternal Storm, there isn't that limitation of only using smaller ships because it's a battle cruiser. But you can guard 2 additional nodes per level in theory. And I say in theory because I don't know if the upgrades are going to scale, but generally speaking, they just stay the same. Then we have Siege Tactics on the IO anti-ship variant and the CTG, Constantine the Great. And this is a pretty good one. If your fleet's command point value is greater than that of your opponent's before entering combat engagement, then the enemy fleet cannot retreat within the first 30 seconds of engagement. And this is the same for both. There's no variations here, except for possibly how many times it can be upgraded. But yeah, this is good. If you've got more CP than your enemy, say you've got your reinforcements in or their fleet's just damaged or whatever, then yeah, this can make sure that you get some damage in if they're not ready for that fight. like you catch them off guard or something, and they get on and they try to pull out, they're going to take some damage and hopefully some losses. And you can pull out whenever you need. So if you make a mistake and you're like, oh no, I can't do this, you can pull out within the first few seconds, pretty much as soon as you see that things are going sideways. Then we have Desperate Measures for the Chimera Defensive and ST59. This is similar to Focus Fire, except it's not that good from my understanding. While in combat, when the enemy's fleet command point is 80% greater than you, prioritize attacks on 4 targets within the with the lowest HP. That's for the Chimera. For the ST59, you prioritize 2 targets. So 80% higher, that's a lot. That's like nearly double your own CP. So your fleet needs to be pretty much at half strength, or they need to be using like +4 reinforcement node or something like that. Because, yeah, that's a pretty big difference. So ideally you're not fighting that battle anyway. Of course, things don't always go to plan. So this can come into action and hopefully take out a few smaller targets. Rather than having the damage spread across tanks and stuff like that. But yeah, you don't want to be, well, from my understanding at least, and my opinion, experience, etc., you don't really want to be actively trying to utilize this because your fleet is 9 times out of 10 going to die. So that's kind of disappointing, but of course it's still there and it's still an option and it can be used. We have Combat Insertion for the Carillion Heavy Cannon. This one's actually pretty good, believe it or not. When the fleet is not the enemy's main target in combat situation, it can prioritize attacks on 5 targets with lower HP. So if you're flanking, you get to focus fire on 5 targets. So essentially, if this is what I think it is and what I just explained, that's really powerful because you can flank the enemy and whatever you're targeting is going to get focused down and killed nice and quickly. Now, focus fire is a little bit contradictory, not contradictory, but people tend to argue about it a bit, saying, if you're damaging more targets, you're going to kill more. And others say focus fire so that you actually kill each target before the either side retreats. And I think this one balances it pretty well, because focusing fire on 5 targets is still taking down a few ships, but it's also not directing all of your weapons at a single ship and losing out on things like retarget, like lock on time and stuff like that. So yeah, in my opinion, that's pretty good. So hopefully Carillion Cannon is a little bit more useful now. Aeris 1 Light Cannon gets Cautious Warning. This one's also interesting. Increase field of vision for qualified feats by 10. I believe it starts off at 5. But all commands will cost 50% more action points. And the activation requirement is that your fleet contains 3 ships that are the same type as Flagship. Increase field of vision by quite a lot. So whether this is gigameters, tiles, or another unit, I don't know. I'll have to wait and see. But that is pretty good, particularly for scouts. But costing 50% more action points is a pretty big tax. But in saying that, this maxed out can save you having to use recons, but you probably also aren't using a full combat fleet for recons. So it sort of contradicts itself here. This would probably be better on a recon style ship, but this ship isn't necessarily a recon. Maybe it's going to become a recon with this new ability, perhaps for people who dedicate their accounts or they've lost their fleets and stuff, and the best that they can do to contribute to their team is recon. Then yeah, this is actually really powerful. It can save you ships, and in the long run AP, because if you're covering a pretty big area, then you're going to need less ships, therefore you're sending out less fleets. But yeah, we'll just have to see how that goes. I probably personally won't use it in my actual combat fleets, but yeah. Optimized reload for AC721, default variant. I suppose I'm glad it got it. P1 players might enjoy this a bit more. Shortens weapon cooldown of AC721 destroyers in the fleet by 10%. It's actually not that bad as a damage boost, but it's on the complete wrong ship for it to be a viable damage boost. So yeah, that's that. Similar thing with the KCC. We have this thing called target guidance, where we increase the hit rate of firing rounds by 5% for the first 2 rounds, and that happens if we have 3 KCC. The AC721 ability happens if you have 3 AC721. So yeah, that's kind of useless because their hit rate isn't outrageous, but they actually need to get used in the first place, and that's kind of a rare occurrence. P1 players, again, might use that more than, probably will use that more than anyone else, or players who, started late, don't have many other options. KCC isn't terrible to the worst extent. I mean, every ship has its use, and I'm a firm believer in that, but it easily gets outranked by other damage dealers. Nevertheless, if your collection isn't very big, don't hesitate to use it, because I remember fighting my P1 with just a bunch of those AC721 carrying the default Corvette, and then using Carillions, just recon Carillions to tank, and I didn't do too bad. I'd destroy level 8 and 9 pirates without any or many losses at the very least. But yeah, that's kind of a sad upgrade, especially as a 5% hit rate isn't going to be used on very many things when you're targeting, or isn't going to be particularly useful when you're targeting cruisers and supercaps. But the Spear of Uranus, Combat Surge, this is very potent. When the fleets engage in combat, they tackle the enemy by approaching them, increasing the time required for both parties to retreat by 45 seconds. That is a lot of time to be locked up with the enemy when you want to be getting out of there. That is a lot of extra damage. So this is a two-edged sword. If you need to get out of there, you need to retreat well before you think that you would retreat without using this ability on the spears. Likewise, if you're the enemy and things aren't going your way, you need to retreat well before things get too bad. Because if you retreat at the last minute, what would normally be the last minute to save your carriers, and it takes 45 extra seconds to get out of there, you've probably lost whatever you were trying to save. So that is a long time for damage to be being dealt, especially with higher level play. When people are using full aircraft swarm fleets and gold ships and all that kind of stuff, that is an awful lot of damage that could be better off not being sustained by unfortunate people. But yeah, as I said, two-edged sword. You don't want to be getting caught up in your own trap, but you can potentially be dealing a lot of extra damage to your enemy. I'm not sure if this, each time you upgrade it, is going to increase and how much by, or if it's going to decrease for some reason, but I doubt that, since the ability tends to be around preventing enemies from retreating. But yeah, do make sure that your power is more than that of your enemy, or retreat before you would normally. But yeah, this is very powerful and maxed out, assuming this gets to nearly a full minute, or a full minute. We'll just have to see how much it actually increases by. My guess would be 5 seconds, but I don't know. I've got no clue. But yeah, that would be incredibly potent. So as far as I can tell, that is all of the flagship abilities, at least all the ones that I've come across, and I've tried to explain them best I can. If I've missed anything or got anything wrong, please let me know. I don't want to be the guy who tells everyone the wrong thing. But yeah, thank you for listening. I hope you find this useful. If you have any requests or you would like me to cover anything, please let me know. Please like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me out a ton, and I really do appreciate it. Have fun in the Lagrange, and I'll see you next time.